Okay, now officially, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is truly the most pleasant occasion I can think of under these circumstances. I would like to welcome all of you to this new session of SputnikPro project, which is actually the first one since we signed a cooperation agreement with gyms, which again for me was well, basically it was the best event of 2020 so far. Then the quarantine started, so there's nothing I did this year that besides signing an agreement with gyms. So once again, I'm very happy to see all of you. Today there's only one topic on everyone's minds, and I think that we will cover it today quite extensively. It's what actually happened to media during the coronavirus outbreak, our own experience, the experience of our journalists combating the virus. But first, let's start with introduction. I will introduce the Russian side, and I will ask Professor to introduce the Indian side. So I'll start with New Delhi, actually. Well, I'm sure that everyone already knows Mrs. Olga Dycheva, the face of Russian Federation. Well, I hope that nobody from the embassy is connected to this. But okay, Mrs. Olga Dycheva, the face of the Russian Federation's media market in New Delhi, who actually made all of this possible from start to finish. My name, of course, is Vasilie Pushkov, and I am the Director of International Cooperation for the Sputnik News Agency. And next to me is actually our main entertainment program tonight, Ms. Tatьяна Кухарeva, I'm sorry, who has a very long title that she wants me to say out loud, but I won't, because that title doesn't do her justice, like at all. For you, just to be, well, the simplest way to explain her is that Sputnik operates in 32 languages. She is responsible for like 3/4 of those, right? So, and basically, I mean the whole shebang, the websites, the radio, the social networks, everything. So if you want to know about what we're doing in China or Argentina, for example, or you have some problem with what we are doing in China or Argentina, she's the person to talk to. She is the person responsible. I'm here just for the picture, to make the whole project prettier here. So, Professor, please introduce your side.
Yeah, a very good morning to every one of you, to the distinguished speakers on the other side of the virtual table, and our very distinguished Mrs. Dychev, Mr. Rashpal Daskotra, our faculty members and students from GIMS. It's been a pleasure to have this interaction. We started off with these interactions in the last year. Then these culminated in an MOU. Well, GIMS has also since then been undergoing changes. We have emigrated from the physical space to the virtual space, just as in this webinar, we have emigrated from one platform to the geographical to the virtual space in terms particularly of the classes that we had to hold. And that was a part of the initiative that the institution took, so that the classes of the students would not get adversely affected. Apart from that, what I would like to mention over here is that we have a community radio, and as is the mandate of any community radio. The mandate is to ensure that the community stays connected, and the community stays connected not just among itself within, it is the intra-community communication only from that perspective, but also from the perspective of the connected connectivity of the community with the nation and the rest of the world. And as a part of these two mandates, the community radio, Dr. Johri will also be telling you about it, has been undertaking a number of programs on sustainability. And because in a pandemic of the proportion of COVID-19, what has come under attack is the sustainability of existence. I I don't know for how threatening or menacing it may be, but then I also believe at the same time, because I believe that every adversity that comes with a dual face. Like they say, it is a Janus-faced event, in the sense that on the one hand it has threatened the very survival of the human race, but on the other hand it has also ensured the survival of the human race by making changes in the ecosystem, the natural environment, which had come under, I would say, increasing pressure and was devastated by man's quest for development, lopsided development, I should say, more of growth, rather could be, even if I could go as far as to say, cancerous growth. Because when one thing grows at the expense of the other, and you lose a sense of symmetry and harmony and balance, then it works against your own interests. So pandemic 19 has been is a mixed bag. It may not always, it's not good to look upon it only as a threat, but also look upon its other side. And therefore, we have at Community Radio Jim's Vasant Kunj been taking efforts to re-energize the communities, our students. We've held a number of sessions on mental health, on immunity boosting, number of sessions with doctors from the best of institutions in the country. So I would say, but this has also impacted media. And when we look at the media, I feel that it has again had a mixed impact on the media. On the one hand, it has impacted, I think the one media which has been impacted the most is the print media. Because number one, people have become very wary of touching the newspaper, because COVID-19 is an infectious disease, so people have been very, very finicky and very insecure about touching the newspapers. This is one thing. So the newspapers have not been allowed into the societies, and people are not reading papers. What has happened is again a similar emigration of media consumption from the physical space to the virtual space. So if media which have relied on the production of the physical product have received a jolt, there is another media which has received a lot of response, and that is the digital media. But there again, I feel that there's been a lot of problems on the part of the advertising. The revenue streams have been affected. So these are certain things which I think would be taken up in the webinar today. I do not want to go deeper into it. I've also done a presentation on this, and it's available on ResearchGate, my own presentation. So I would like to end over here, because there are many distinguished speakers available today and who would be sharing their thoughts with our students. So needless to say that James feels greatly obliged and feels greatly thankful to Olga Dichev to have energized and got it formalized, this kind of an interaction, because I am a votary of internationalization of discourses. Narratives need to jump out of national boundaries. And why not? Because this whole world is a human family. The only thing is, as long as there is that feeling of Vasudev Kutumbam, that this world is a family and we are all one under the skin, then there should be no boundaries. Boundaries are meant for other purposes, not for perception. So thank you very much, and over to you, Mr. Pushko.
Thank you so much.
Vasily, yes, 1 minute. Professor Thar, can we introduce Dr. Neeru Jory?
Yeah, sure.
Dr. Neeru Jory blends of more than 2 decades of experience both in academics and industry. She not only professor of journalism, but she spent a lot of time in social industry, like social worker. And my great thanks to her, my great thanks to Sushmita Jaipuriar, because without her help, it was not impossible to organize. And of course, my thanks to my friend Rashpal Dasgotra, because we are, like you are telling, we are a very big family, you see, who are working to make this event go to life. So thank you very much. And Dr. Neeru, I not see her. She wants also to tell a few words, or not necessary. How, Dr. Thar?
I'm not sure if her mic is on. This is another point I wanted to touch before we start. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Professor, for that introduction. As always, I can listen to you for hours. It's a pleasure, sir. Because of the connection and the instability of Zoom, I have nothing against Zoom. It has been a lifesaver for the entire planet during the last 5 months. But still, because of the instability of the connection, we had to mute all of the microphones besides the professor, Olga Dycheva, and of course myself, and Tatiana. And but I'm sure you're all already familiar with how Zoom works. So this app has a chat function, right? You all know that Zoom has a chat. You can just nod your head in response. I can see all of you. So yeah, okay. So somebody even knows the thumbs up icon. Okay, so please, we want to make it not just a lecture. We want to make it a conversation. The SputnikPro project is it's a cross-educational project. It's an exchange of experience. So please. My colleagues here in Russia, they're monitoring the chat of today's session. So everything you would like Tatyana Kukhareva to talk about, you just type it into chat, and my colleagues will send it to me. I'll see it. I'll just tell her the questions, and she will answer them. Okay? Is that clear? Okay?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Well, at least 20% of you are nodding. That's already an improvement. Okay. Okay. Well, then I'm giving the floor to Tatyana. Then, please.
Oh, really? Yeah. I don't have a thumbs up icon. I can just do this. You know, whenever anything happens. I would like to tell you first and foremost, guys, how grateful I am to be here with you today, especially at this. It's a difficult time. It's a difficult time for all of us. It is a difficult time, certainly for India. So my hopes and prayers with your wonderful, amazing country to get through this terrible situation, generally, the terrible worldwide situation with the virus that is still spreading and that we're still combating. And I hope that your families stay healthy as well. So, the pandemic. The pandemic that's affected not just the way we live, but obviously every sphere of life and the media as well. And the media in a very peculiar way. As you might know, so I would start this off with questions, but sadly with the Zoom format that we're quite, I wouldn't say that we're new to, but not at this scale, I'd say, not that many people. So sadly we'll have to stick to the questions at the end of the thing, well, at the middle. I'm pretty sure that you do know that the majority of the media... I think Vasily is very scared that I'll start with the questions and then he'll have to read the questions from the chat.
I can read the chat. I have 10 good mornings, ma'am. So, okay, so if that helps you at all, please.
So, good morning. Right, so the media. It's a weird situation for me to address it from, but, being that Sputnik is a state media, so we have been lucky enough to not have suffered the biggest effect that the pandemic and anything of that scale has thrown onto the general media scene in the world, because we are so far, we're financed from the budget. That means that we do not depend on advertisers. And the biggest hit, well, we do like them, but we don't quite depend on them. The biggest hit that the media everywhere have suffered so far was the fact that as soon as everybody went on lockdown, it created a very weird situation when, first of all, people started reading the media more, and the general interest towards what is being published anywhere, but mostly the internet, obviously, has spiked. People have started watching the TV more. People have started reading the websites more. First of all, because everybody was literally stuck at home. But also is this whole feeling of uncertainty and feeling of, needing to have that information, because, when you have the information, you have a sense of control over what's going on in the world, or at least in your country, in your neighborhood, in your city. And at the end of the day, in the same time, we've had a huge drop in advertising. Well, not we, but we, if I speak for the media in general. And that was a huge blow to every single privately owned media on the planet. I know that the majority of them actually have had to cut salaries at the very beginning of this situation, because not by a lot, but by at least 25%, because people were unsure of whether they would actually be able to pay the salaries. And you've heard it, that in every country there were very, very many promises that yes, we will supply, we will sustain, we will try to make everybody survive this situation. But I dare say, even in the United States, which says that it's obviously it's claims that it's number one economically, but there were many more promises than there were actually actions, and any and every means that was possible to give to the population would obviously not go to the media that are functioning, but to the people who have actually lost their jobs. So the general idea and the strive across the whole industry was to keep the jobs of the people working, because also not only it's just it's the human thing to do, but also the demand for information was incredible. People actually started not only reading and watching, but also, it was a sort of the only thing that was in control when I'm not quite sure how much time it has been for you guys to stay at home.
Oh, right. Professor, or Mrs. Disho, when did the quarantine officially start in New Delhi, for example?
20, around 20 of March and finished 31st of May.
21st of March, 20th was Jan in Hindi.
So April, May, yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
2 or 3
June, 3 months, over 3 months.
3 months.
Over 3 months.
Over 3 months.
But I'm pretty sure that right now we can safely say that first of all everybody's tuning in from home. Yeah, so I can see that you guys are not in class. That the restrictive measures are kind of continued. It's not over. Especially with the numbers that we've seen, sadly. So that has been, so we say March, April, May, and then we can't really say that June and July have so far been a return to normal life, can we? So that's 4 months of staying at home. And when you stay at home, you kind of, there's this sentiment of losing control of what's going on in the world, outside of the apartment, outside of the house, outside of your little, bubble. So reading the media was one of the very few means of controlling the situation that we've gotten, that we kept with us. Reading every single bit of information about this disease, about what's going on in the neighboring countries, but also not generally limited to COVID-19. Even the general interest towards general politics has grown, and we've seen it from the number of the people who have been reading and watching. So that was the first hit to the industry, was the financial one. It was this whole dilemma of how to keep people in places, how to keep them employed, because not only we needed to produce more information, because everybody was eating it up, but also, just to keep up and to ensure that our employees were able to feed their families and to buy medicine if needed. Thankfully, we've not had many cases in the agency, across the agency. I dare say we have had very few cases of COVID, although we were very, very much shocked at how it was addressed in other countries. Some other countries that were. We were faced with the medical system head on, and that was also, speaking of then there's still the human approach to the human part of it, is that with a global media like Sputnik and like Россия сегодня media group, then you have different countries, you have people in different countries, people who sometimes get sick, people who you have to look out for, and that was also a huge challenge because we talk about the difference in mentality a lot generally when you work with different countries. For instance, there's even when I come to India, there's still such a vast pool of things that I don't know about the mentality, about the tradition, although I try to study it up before the visits, but it's just such a culturally rich country that you're just overwhelmed with everything that you need to know to just go there and to communicate with people and to not be offensive, or just to talk speak the same language, and that was very much a challenge also to get everybody in every single hub to to first of all to take in every single part of the every single office across the globe, because that for instance Sputnik International, we have an office in Washington DC. I think for us they were the first ones to go on lockdown. They were the first ones to go on fully remote operation. Yes, I mean for Sputnik International, but Beijing, yes, obviously, Beijing. I think that people, this whole part of COVID-19 before it went outside of China, it kind of seems like a separate story anymore, because it was very much internal and everybody was watching it from outside in, and feeling compassionate, but kind of just something that will not happen to us. And then it went global and it was a very different story. So yes, obviously the Chinese office went on lockdown first, but if we talk about Sputnik International, the English language website, then the first office to have gone on lockdown was Washington DC. They started working remotely, and it was the first kind of challenge that they handled very gracefully, because Washington DC is predominantly radio, and for the radio, it was a completely different world, broadcasting from home. I have worked in television. I did work in television before I came to Sputnik. It doesn't really, even for me, having worked through several, health crises, local health crises, the flu epidemics, even one of the coronaviruses, the previous coronaviruses, we never really went on lockdown. It was a completely unprecedented scenario that everybody would actually broadcast from home. And although technically it's actually very, very, very possible to do, but it was also a mental issue, an issue of explaining to people, because in the world of broadcasting, the whole, feeling of being in the studio, it's so surreal. There's the adrenaline that you can't really match. It's incredible, and the feeling of going live, the studio, seeing the every single bit of technology there, and then to face the fact that you're actually going to be broadcasting from home, that everything you really need to broadcast for this whole huge amazing operation is your computer and a microphone, and not even that, if it's a very, very good computer, that may be just your computer. That was a mind changer. That was such a huge shift in mentality, in perspective, in understanding what the world has come to, and the technology has come to. The grasping the concept of just how much of a technological journey we've come through, for it to be kind of to be condensed to this box that allows you to do everything from home, and then so for the radio, it was generally a change of mentality that everybody had to go through, and just to understand the whole concept of the fact that you can broadcast from home, you can broadcast at a good quality. You can actually do everything. You can get guests, you can connect them via the internet. You don't need a huge, huge apparatus functioning to get you to have live guests, to have live conferences, just like the one that we're having right now. And the whole, I think that, I dare say that imagining that you'd have 37 people tuning in to one place from 37 different places. So not just a video conference when you are all in the same room. I am in another room and we have that one link. No, but 37 of them. That itself is mind-blowing. It's a completely different concept and it's a completely different reality for everybody, not just for journalists, but for journalists as well. And then very shortly after our DC offices went on full lockdown, they only kept 4 people who were doing technical maintenance. Excuse me. They were the ones actually coming still to the office on a daily basis to maintain the connections between everybody else, but we had also 30 other people working from home. I'm very, 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 very incredibly happy to say that Washington, D.C. has not had the same scope of the problem that we've seen from New York or from California or from the state of Washington. They were very, lucky or vigilant. It's either one or the other, or both. So it does help that not every capital of every country goes through the same scope of the pandemic.
Just to give you a breather, and I want to say that right now we're talking about 37 places in Moscow, in New Delhi. Just the day after tomorrow, we are actually going to host a BRICS media roundtable, and we will be connecting 5 capitals from Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. So that will be a challenge because it will start at 3 o'clock here, Moscow time, and it will be already late in the evening in China, and it will be very early in the morning in Brazil. Yeah, so it will. It's a fun thing. This Zoom conference call is a fun thing, but there is actually a problem which many correspondents actually told me started to influence their lives because so far even psychologists noticed it. We are losing some sort of psychological border between our work life and our home life. I've gotten so used to these Zoom conferences that just about three or 4 days ago, I had a Zoom conference with my mother, and my first thought was, what should I wear? Is it okay for me to appear like this?
You can just turn off the camera, you know that. Yeah.
With my mother, what's the point?
No, not with your mother.
She's not calling to hear me speak. She's calling to see if I'm still alive because she's convinced otherwise. So that's a huge problem for basically everyone, especially journalists who are working with people, because you're losing this borderline between work and your private life, and that's a bad thing. All the doctors agree that that's not a good thing for a professional person. But still,
not just for the professional person. It's generally sticking with that whole human factor approach. That it's one thing that the Zoom things. That one thing that is given us is that freedom of you can tune in from everywhere. So technically speaking, you don't need to be at home. You can walk your dog at the best scenario and tune into the conference. At the worst scenario, you could be somewhere on the beach. and just turn off the camera and nobody knows where you are.
Okay,
which
so
is also
the day after tomorrow, I'll be moderating the BRICS Media Forum, walking my dog. Okay, I got the idea.
But yes, that was the and it's not just that. It's the because obviously and even us, we have a huge wire service that's as a part of the organization. And also quite a few journalists that are used to flying, that are used to going on location, getting those first-hand accounts, and those people they have been struggling because obviously we've had to ground them. And not just, not just ground them. It's we couldn't, by generally speaking, in Moscow, for instance, that we couldn't in the midst of our lockdown and our quarantine measures, we were not allowed to go out of the house at all. We could go to the shop, the nearest shop. You could go to the nearest pharmacy. You could walk your dog at a distance not exceeding 100 meters from your house, and that's it. And not only does that really, really work wonders on your, on your psychological condition, because not only you lose that borderline of when you work and when you do not work, you kind of completely lose feeling of when it is the week and when it is the weekend, when it is 1 week and when it is the other week. People stop, the all kind of social boundaries that are usually in place. You wouldn't call somebody at 10 o'clock in the evening because you know that they're not at the office, they're at home. They went completely out the window. I know that the majority of people in the media and in the bordering industries, bordering matters like PR, like consulting, they have started working. We've spoken about it, and we've had we've read the surveys, but they've said that they've been working more hours on quarantine, and significantly more hours. So they went from, say, 8 to 10 hour working day to 10 to infinity. Because you don't need to go anywhere to participate in a meeting. You have to turn on your smartphone or your computer. So it's kind of a TV presenter kind of situation, that general long-term joke of, you only see TV presenters from waist up. So whatever's going on under the table, they might not be wearing clothes. They might be just sitting there and, yes, Vasa?
Go on.
No, but that's the thing, though, isn't it? When the TV stations that only have people sitting down during broadcast, during summer they would come in shorts, but a complete suit up top. So there are two different people, divided by this table, and that's the thing. That was the same thing. Yeah. Again, seriously, I can see the jokes coming
No.
on your forehead.
I'm just going to interrupt you because the question started coincidentally.
Are we wearing clothes?
Okay. Okay, I'll just start from the first one. Good morning, ma'am. My question to you is how can this pandemic affect the field journalism. Like we have seen that many field journalists have contracted the virus while reporting. So can we expect any changes in field journalism with regards to pandemic so that safety of journalists and reporters could be ensured?
Guys, I'm going to be real with you. Scary thought. But if you've ever encountered an actual field journalist, it is very difficult to get them to think about their own safety. That is just the way it is. And coming from, speaking from a managerial point of view, we have tested our journalists extensively. We have had them have masks and gloves. I can't say wear, because you can't really make somebody wear, a mask and gloves. But we have done what we have possibly could have thought of to ensure their safety. But I remember it's a very vivid scene in my mind, and it probably always will be, when I was still working on TV, and we had a couple of war correspondents, obviously, who basically are the definition of field journalism. They would go, and it's an extremum, but they would go to the toughest parts of the world. And that's not a pandemic. Cynically speaking, if you go to a war zone, your chances of dying are kind of higher than from a pandemic. You can get sick, but you can get better. If you get shot, you might get shot badly. You might die on the spot. And we had one correspondent who was, she was extremely, not popular, but she was, she is a woman, blonde woman, who would, extremely tough, but she would go to the worst places imaginable. At that point, that was Syria. That was the beginning, the very, very beginning of the Syrian conflict. And she would always be there in the field, and she would send us packages, and she would not be wearing a vest, for instance. So we would literally have to talk her, to call her from Moscow and to talk her into wearing a protective vest and a helmet. Because we from Moscow had to explain to her that people watching her, and she would say that in a very, let's say, in a language that would not go through censorship, and that I would not feel comfortable talking in to students. She would say that she would not want to wear them because, first of all, they're very heavy, and it's difficult to run in them. And second of all, she doesn't care for them because it's, and I quote, just a couple of bullets. So that person, we had to call her from Moscow and to try to reason with her that people watching her would not believe that she's actually standing and those are real bullets flying that we can hear on the video. Because any normal person would go running for their life. But the point that I'm trying to make is that field journalism is a very specific part of journalism. The people who go on location, who go into war zones, who just generally the flyers, they don't think the same way. For them to ground them and to tell them you're not going there because there's a pandemic, it's like, I don't know, it's like telling a doctor that you're not going to treat a sick person because he is really sick, you can contract that disease. You know that many doctors have also contracted COVID-19 just treating patients. It's kind of the same mentality. People, the journalists that live for that thrill of trips, of seeing different parts of the world, they would literally do anything to continue with that type of work. So on the one hand, we need to ensure that they're safe. We need to ensure that they're being healthy. They are leading a lifestyle that ensures a healthy immune system. On the other hand, these are the people that will actually beg to go anywhere. So that's a very thin line that you have to walk. And I'm not quite sure that also, I dare say that journalism as it is cannot survive without field journalism. The media will not survive without field journalism. Because you cannot really, as much as you can get accounts from people on the spot using the internet, but then there's a question of verifying those reports and verifying them so that, and getting pictures. Yes, you can do that. You can ask for people to send you pictures. You can ask for people to send you accounts, to record those accounts, to do whatever. But there's nothing like a personal account as well, a personal account of the journalist that is going to those locations.
Actually, I have a friend who is working as a correspondent, our correspondent right now in New York, and I was Zooming with him during when the riots and the looting started, and he showed me through Zoom the fires and the people shouting, and I asked him, why are you not wearing a mask? And he said that the mask is not, the virus is not my biggest problem right now. My biggest problem right now are the bottles, the glass bottles being thrown at my head, and the mask doesn't protect me from that. So, but actually it makes the running from bottles more difficult. So he wasn't, that was the reason he was not wearing one. Okay, so here's a purely Indian question. Has the journalistic freedom received a blow with many governments employing strict lockdowns, restricting movements, etc.? How about your journalistic freedom, Tatiana?
Well, my journalistic freedom has not suffered one bit, but it was just purely my psychological state that I was worried about, because I was very unfortunate to have moved to a smaller apartment. So I personally was only worried about surviving in a very confined space. Journalistic freedoms. Well, it doesn't really affect the lockdown. Doesn't really affect your freedom of expression, does it? Because again, you have the internet. And strictly speaking, you can express your freedom of expression, pun intended. You can go on the internet, you can start a blog, you can write about it. You don't need to go outside to express your opinions. Speaking of the journalistic freedoms, is always a very tough thing to talk about generally, because it's a very relative thing, isn't it? Because we like to talk about it, and that actually was peddled through by the Western media, that state media in a specific country is a tool of censorship and a tool of oppression. Where in the real world, if we strip all of that agenda, political agenda mainly, aside, any media, any and every media on the face of the planet has an editorial policy. Every single one of them. Even the ones that portray themselves as, the independent media, you can't really be independent because somebody has to be paying for you. So whereas this is an American oligarch who wants to peddle through, if we talk about India, whether it's the American government and the American rich people trying to tell you guys, and their editorial policy would generally be circled around trying to expose the said censorship in India, or it's an Indian state media that would have a different editorial policy. They would both have an editorial policy. And as much as you can't say one thing in one media, you couldn't say a very opposite thing in another one. So there is no such thing as ultimate 100% journalistic freedom. You always are defined by the editorial policy of your media. But you can choose the media that corresponds with your views and beliefs and etc. So you don't feel like you have to confine, you have to shape your narrative in a way that does not correspond with your personal beliefs. I think that's the healthy thing to do, and that has generally nothing to do with the pandemic. That's just a general life question of how you choose the place that you work for. But again, guys, this is a very important thing that the liberal American media have had us believe for quite some time, and that we need to stop taking as 100% truth. That there are some, groundbreakingly freeing, pro-democracy media in the world. There are none. Every single media has an editorial policy. Every single media is biased in a way. The rest of it goes to, journalistic integrity, balance, you're being able to, you being outright incredibly biased, or you just having an editorial policy. Those are, again, two very different things. But none of us are 100% objective, and I'm not afraid to say it. We all have an editorial policy. Some of us get to a point where we determine that editorial policy, others just comply with it, but it wouldn't exist otherwise, because people are interested in different points of view, and you can't give one point of view on one issue and completely the opposite on the other one, because they would actually clash.
I think it's also necessary to add that regarding the last part of the question, the lockdowns and the restrictions on movement, I'm sure that I think I'm positive that in New Delhi as well as in Russia, journalists
were able to move,
were allowed to move. Everyone carrying a journalistic an ID, an official ID of journalist, could move even during the strictest lockdowns. There's no actual sense in moving anywhere, because all the streets are empty, all the offices are empty. There's no one anywhere. So okay, you can move. So what? Go move. There's nowhere to move, because all the people are sitting at home. You'll have more luck just connecting to them through Zoom. But still, all of us here with journalistic IDs, we were immune to lockdowns. Okay, good morning, ma'am. My question is how this pandemic has affected the content creation around the industry.
Oh, that's a very interesting
question.
With
the demand of the content, for the content continuously rising.
It has affected it a great deal, because it's not just about the demand for content rising, it's also about, again, a very human approach to that problem, is that, obviously there was a lot of content based on, COVID-19 and about COVID-19. But I think you would agree with me as, future professional journalists, that if you read something and things about COVID-19 24/7, you would actually go crazy. So it was a very fine line between delivering the information, delivering more information, and delivering very, very fast, delivering very up to speed information on COVID-19 so that our viewers are informed, but also making a point of creating a very healthy dose of content that would get them distracted from it. That would get people to, I don't know, smile, laugh, have a moment when they don't think about the fact that everybody, and that I don't know how it was in India because I wasn't there. I could only, rely on things that were, that we found out from official channels and that we've spoken of with my colleagues. But in the beginning, when it was a very strict lockdown, the numbers were rising, that it was the feeling that like literally you might go outside and contract it and die in a week's time. So that whole feeling that we needed to kind of to soften, to make people realize there's a whole world outside of COVID-19. There are news that do not pertain to COVID-19. There are stories that people still live their lives somewhere in the world. There are lighter stories, that the good, and also it's weird to say the good side of COVID-19, but the better side, like pollution going down, the positive side effect, if there was any. Rivers clearing, oceans clearing up, because people were growing restless, people were growing paranoid and depressed. And that was also a task for the media as well, to kind of, to drag people out of that depression, to make them not just read information on COVID.
Well, I have to say for the record that I don't agree with the whole sadness of the quarantine. I had a blast.
Where did you spend your quarantine?
At home. I'm not going. Until I retire. I will not have. I won't be able to have a vacation of this level of pleasure that I've experienced during the last 4 months. I've done everything I've dreamed to do for the last 10 years of my life. But okay.
Everything?
Almost.
No,
Almost.
God no. No, I mean, I can't say that my quarantine was so horrendous. I would say I suffered for the first month just from that restrictive, the feeling of restriction that you can't do something, that that whole situation when they tell you that you can't do something that's the only thing you want to do. That you can't go to the office, and you're like, but I love the office, but I like my office, I need it, I need my office, and that that whole thing that you struggle with. But I personally, I made a very, very crazy and wise decision. I got a puppy just before the quarantine began, like the night before we went on lockdown. The night before we went on working from home, I drove to to the
Pound. No,
it's
zoo
not a pound.
shop.
It's not a zoo shop. It's the people who actually breed, the breeders
Okay.
breed that specific breed. And I got myself a puppy, so because I figured that's they always say that you should, when you get a small dog, you have to spend some time with it, and that's the most time that I could have spent with my puppy is that that 2.5 months of quarantine. She was very shocked when she discovered that I actually have some place to be outside of the apartment. That was a very interesting time.
Again, very sad ending. Very sad ending.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to do something very undemocratic right now. I'm going to skip a couple of questions and move directly to the question by
censorship in action.
Yeah, I will be using my power of censorship right now, and I will jump immediately to a question by by director Dehar. So sorry about that. I just like him so much. So I just want to do it. So how has the authenticity of numbers of people reported by the governments as infected and dying was handled by the mass media?
Oh, the authenticity. That also is a very Indian question, I would say. Very pressing matters for certain countries. I could I could say that for instance for Russia it was we did get those reports from part of the country where it was very, very bad, and the media actually discovered it, and it went viral. Everybody was reading up on it, and but we haven't had that many doubts in the authenticity of the numbers that we get presented. Whereas in some other parts of the world, generally speaking, it's always about balance. It's always about checking and putting a healthy amount of doubt in everything that is told to you. However, with the governments, you can't really just say that, the government is obviously lying unless you have proof. So it's always about, if we're talking about the authenticity of the data of the people who have been sick and dying, for me, the most devastating example of the untruthfulness of that data was not even in, it wasn't the country that you would automatically think of. It was the UK, actually. And we were faced with it completely by accident because we had a person who was sick in our Edinburgh office. He's a young guy. He is 26, if I'm not mistaken, and he got COVID. They were already working from home. He was suffering from very, very, very high fevers, and he actually had to call the NHS, the National Health Service, 3 times. He called them, and every time he said, well, guys, I feel like, and everybody who had COVID-19 have said the same thing. It's like, it feels like the worst flu you've ever possibly imagined, and the fever is crazy. So he called them, he got sick on Thursday. He called them twice or 3 times over the weekend, like starting from Thursday through the weekend. And he told them, guys, I have a high fever. I feel incredibly bad. I can barely move. What should I do? And what they told him was something that shocked me to the core at that point, because we were obviously monitoring and staying in touch and trying to figure out how to get him treated the best way. They told him that, well, you know what? If your temperature spikes even higher, then you can come to the office, and then we will test you. Not that we will treat you, not that, we have a doctor on the way. No, that if your temperature goes beyond 40 degrees Celsius, then you can walk to the office, come to the office, and then we will test you. And we actually ran a couple of articles on speaking with, health experts and people who have contracted it, just talking about the whole, the cynicism of the whole thing, and the fact that you wouldn't think about it, but the UK has probably about 2 times more people who have contracted COVID then they report, because they wouldn't even test him. He was having all of the symptoms that we, by that time, knew were consistent with COVID-19. They wouldn't test him unless his temperature went way through the roof and he came to the office. So when his temperature actually did go even higher, he did go to the office, he did get tested. But the only recommendation before the test was to stay at home and drink a lot of liquid. And as soon as we were faced with that, but I dare say that we would not have really realized that unless we had someone, that we followed closely, his journey through this whole thing. It was shocking because, the UK was one of the countries that spent so much time, they paid so much attention to the effort that the NHS was making, whereas in fact, for a Russian person, for instance, they were not making any effort at all. It was, to me, as a person with a different mentality from a different country where it was handled differently, it was scandalous, the fact that they wouldn't treat him at all. So we did run those articles, we did talk to him, we talked to other people, we did run a bunch of materials on the website, focusing on the fact that the UK, first of all, is not reporting every case that they have, and the dysfunctionality of their health service. So it's a matter of, having that information and running it, but again, it's always also, it has to fall in line with your editorial policy.
Again, I would like just to add, everyone always forgets about, we're talking about the authenticity of numbers of COVID. People always forget about the famous dilemma, the doctor dilemma of COVID. So for the person to have officially died from COVID-19, the main thing that is necessary for that is for the doctor to write COVID-19 in the case of death, in the cause of death, the cause of death. So that's the only thing necessary for the number to add up to the whole thing. So it's not the actual cause of the actual cause of death. It's what the doctor writes in the cause of death, and the only way any doctor in any country has a right to write COVID-19 as a cause of death of somebody, it's when he has a positive test of that, positive test for COVID-19 of that person. Just think about that. And there's also the other side of the dilemma when, for example, a person fell out of a huge building and died, and during the autopsy they found out that he had COVID-19, right? So did he die of COVID-19? I'm not sure. No, I think that it was mostly gravity that killed him. We actually have a rising number of questions, so we should make the answers shorter. Good morning, respected teachers and hosts. My question is the following. We know that Sputnik has 22 editorial centers working with approximately 32 languages, and also there's SputnikPro at hand, where students from different demographics compete. Okay. How has the work at the centers at hubs been affected, and how is the SputnikPro being planned? And also, Sputnik has 18 million plus subscribers all across the digital platforms. So how has the reach been affected, and how has the workload graph been between the editorial centers and the digital platforms?
I'm not quite sure what you mean by the work graph.
And I think the workload,
The workload was heavy. The work was affected very in a very specific manner. We all went to work remotely. Every single editorial center, everybody literally went to work remotely, and they still do. Actually, the majority of them. So, yeah, but literally everybody started working from home. We've had to check, I beg your pardon, it was a very early morning, and no coffee. My biggest suffering is that the coffee shop started its work at just the same time that we started this conference. So I have a dream to look forward to, a cup of coffee. It's very simple. Literally everybody went to work remotely. For the SputnikPro part.
For the SputnikPro part, we have just been allowed to walk our kids in the parks. So I'm guessing it's a little bit early to start planning huge SputnikPro sessions with participants from abroad flying in through our many airports. But I'm really hoping that by the beginning of 2021 we'll be back on track. Question. Since media is an integral part of every society and the medium to bring news to the public, have the governments taken any measures on their behalf to provide the media persons with the PPE kits, personal protection equipment, and other safety kits, since this is one of the most important measures that need to be taken?
That's also a tricky question because, and that's my personal belief, that the government actually has to provide PPE kits. I don't believe in, really the full-on PPE kit, that whole hazmat thing. I was quite afraid of COVID-19 in the beginning. I would not walk out my house in a PPE kit unless I was going into an infected area, like the hospital where everybody has COVID-19. That's the only reason I would put on a full-on PPE kit as a journalist. And also, I think that the government actually must only supply PPE kits to the media that it finances, because the other media are financed by, organizations, people, and it's the job of the employer to provide safety kits for its employees. But that's generally just my opinion.
No, I don't believe in government providing PPE kits. I think it's more up to local authorities, companies, whatever. I mean,
and also about just general personal hygiene.
Yeah,
it's not that the COVID-19, however scary it is about social distancing, yes, a good immune system, yes, and personal hygiene. That meme when the woman was saying that you can't touch your face, and if you've touched a handle and then you touch your face, that's how it gets transmitted.
And
so wash your hands.
Lots and lots of liquids.
Yeah.
We're going back to field journalism right now. Question. As you said that field journalism is an integral part of this field, do you think that due to the pandemic, the course of journalism has been pushed back a few years in some ways, like not being able to record or directly showcase the ongoing scenario? And do you feel that due to the current scenario, maybe the journalism field might adopt this kind of work style as being convenient? I mean, the distancing, I think.
I don't believe any of those, because first of all, When something big actually happened, like the riots and the Black Lives Matter movement in the US, every single field journalist actually went to those riots. They did not stay at home despite COVID-19. Again, that's a very different mentality. Those people, you actually have to fight with them to keep them at home, to make them stay at home and not go anywhere. I think one of my journalists has actually, he actually searched for a long time. He actually did find a trip that I allowed him to take. Within Russia, he did find a press tour that was completely safe, and they complied with every safety regulation out there. And he forced me to approve it. And also, I don't think that, given the fact that the technology has gone such a long way, and you can tune into street cams, you can get footage from street cams. In a lot of places, there are a lot of street cams, there are a lot of CCTV cams. You can call any place that has a phone, or any person who has a mobile phone. I don't think that the current style of journalism can be described as convenient. It's just had a much larger toll on our producers to get guests, to get people talking, which was not that difficult because people were stuck at home. They had nothing else to do. They were very eager to talk to journalists. And the authenticity, like, seriously, we've produced stories from California about the situation with homeless people there, because there's a huge problem with homeless people in San Francisco. We've had that produced completely out of Moscow. So every single picture, photo, account we've gotten through the internet. We've gotten people to talk, we've gotten people to actually send us pictures, people who just walk the streets, they happen to walk the streets. We've checked everything, we've done it all without stepping foot into San Francisco. It's a different mentality, it's about appreciating the technology and being able to work it to the bone. But modern technology does allow for you to produce stories without stepping foot outside of your apartment, which is the craziest thing that the pandemic has taught us.
I love how the next question begins. Being the first pandemic of the digital age, I just want to ask a person who wrote this. Can you, if you have any information of this on the second pandemic of the digital age, can you just drop me a few lines on email, just when to expect it? I would just rather isolate in some other place. But okay, being the first pandemic of the digital age, social media has become the primary public information platform for people, and it mostly consists of panic and speculation. How do you see it as a challenge to mainstream mass media? Actually, let's combine the two questions. And there's another question from the second person. There was already a shift going on from traditional media to digital media. So do you think that COVID-19 has acted like a catalyst to the same process? And are we having any plans for not letting our traditional media lose its importance?
Again, I don't think that we'll start from the last question. I don't think that the traditional media, but then we have to understand that the traditional media, for instance, is TV as well. So when we talk about papers, yes, I do believe that for the papers, that was a wake-up call that, that might be a time to think to actually getting a digital copy of that paper. But in terms of TV and radio, that pandemic was a lifesaver because you turn on for people living alone, for instance, you turn on the TV, you have the illusion of not being alone in your house where you're stuck 24/7. And television has seen huge spikes in the numbers of the people watching it. So no, I don't think that traditional media are that challenged. I think that the current media sphere is a very diverse one, and there's place for everybody in there because, everything that was already out of date has actually already died almost. The current combination is there's a reason why it exists and the way it exists. There's some things that the TV does give you that you can't really get from online unless you imitate the TV and you make online TV, but it's still television. When we talk about social networks and social media, I wouldn't agree because I think that it's not the pandemic that's made them the primary source of information. That happened about 3-4 years ago. That social media have become, or even earlier, that they've become the primary source of information. What we have seen in the past years is, for instance, Facebook scaling down that whole thing and trying to censor the information that is being put up by users and saying that we don't want news on our platform. It's not what it was about initially. But generally speaking, even 3 and 4 years ago, it was already the primary source of information about something that's happened just now because people would start tweeting, posting, filming, and putting it on social networks. And people are generally prone to panic. That's just the way the society works. There are very few people that will not panic in a situation where, like the pandemic, because you're confined to your own home, you're going crazy, literally. You think that you step foot outside your apartment, you get sick, you die. That's it. It's not about social networks. It's about, if we didn't have social networks, we would have something else that would convey the same panic, because that's the other thing that people need, that every person needs an outburst, a way to channel that panic, to discuss it with other people. Because if you don't discuss it, you keep it in yourself, that just doesn't do any good for your psychological state. I don't believe that affects the media that much. I do believe it's for any journalist, and I do believe that we've even had that conversation with some of my journalists, that as a journalist, you don't have a right to panic. You don't have a right to subdue yourself to that whole panicky mood, because as a journalist you are obliged to have a very clear mind, to be able to think analytically and to think clearly. That's it. That's the job. The job is to sort through the emotions. We as news people, we don't have a privilege to have emotion, really. We convey the information. We need to be able to analyze, to collect, to think, to produce something that people can have emotions about. But it's not our job to pour our emotions into our writing. Not really. Not in the news business. There might be stories that require that, but that's a very limited part of the work that we do. The rest of it is very much about the ability to think, and to be able to think, you cannot be in a panic.
Actually, I see here a recurring topic that I have to address. It's just how maybe the questions are phrased, but I see that there's always a connection being made between a source of information being reliable and the format in which it is delivered. The traditional formats, the traditional media move to digital media. I have to say honestly, I don't own a television set. I haven't watched broadcast television for I don't know, maybe
I watch them online.
10 years. Well, that's
But it's still television.
It's
See?
yeah, but not just. It's not. Let's just forget about it being traditional media, right? It's the format that counts.
Yeah, I think that's very wrong. And it's something that has been enforced on us from the West, and I can say us because we're neither you guys nor us. We're in the West. We're kind of we're Eastern nations. It's that whole necessity of putting something in a box. This is traditional media. This is non-traditional media. That's again, and all of those labels are being used, used with a certain connotation to say that something is good or something is bad. It's just wrong because, again, like in my situation, I don't own a TV set back from the days when I worked in TV. And I couldn't see any more sets. Generally, I was not having it. I only see an actual TV set when I come to my parents' house and when we watch something, some movie. But I do watch TV. I watch the BBC. I watch Sky. I watch RT, and I do that on the internet. Does that make that traditional media or non-traditional media? Because that's on the internet. But it is very much traditional media, but because that is television. So it's more than that. It's what exists right now. It's how it exists right now, and it's not,
Just to bring it back to your previous point about the brands and the agendas and the editorial policies, those are the things that count, not the format. I mean, in Russia, I don't remember the last time I've actually seen a live person with a print newspaper in their hands. But that doesn't mean that the brands themselves are gone. They just went online, and that has no connection to how reliable or unreliable they are as a source of information. The unreliable ones were unreliable when they printed newspapers. The reliable ones are continuing to be reliable even after they've moved to online formats. Okay. Also a comment. I will just read it through. We know that the print media again is suffering in this pandemic, and people have stopped reading newspapers now more than ever. We also know that the local newspapers are extremely important to get information, and national media heavily draws from them. What can the print media industry do differently during and after the pandemic to continue running? And what can we do as a nation to ensure that local newspapers continue to run? That's actually a warm feeling, supporting your local newspaper.
Yeah, it is a warm feeling. But again, why can't they go online? Why can't they go digital? And on a separate note, not like not as a as a media professional, but what I would personally do, I have a canister of spirit at home, so I spray everything that I don't want to touch before disinfecting it. I literally spray everything with 90% spirit. But that's kind of I mean, everybody. What we've seen in Russia, for instance, is that everybody who could possibly go online actually made that shift during the pandemic. The people, Every cafe got to switch to delivery mode. Everything, every single thing went online. So it's not that far a stretch from being a local newspaper to being a local website, a local news website. I wouldn't say abolish print form at all, but I would say that a healthy switch to having a digital version is very much inevitable for every media, every size media.
Okay. Okay, so now we're moving to the actual hot stuff here. Much like the views expressed in last year's report, providing correct content is seen as more important than revenue, exclusivity, or being the first to publish the story. The public's trust in the media is increasing, and with this pandemic, we can see a lot of cases of fake news being circulated. How should journalists try and eliminate themselves from fake news stigma to ensure the content is 100% accurate?
Oh, that's my favorite question so far. You know why? Because I hate the word fake news. Because, again, thank you to the American establishment that actually made that whole thing a thing. But there is, guys, fake news, thank you so much. Fake news is such a thing blown completely out of proportion by the US establishment and media that it is ridiculous that we have to talk about it, generally speaking. First of all, the speed counts. If we're talking news, you have to be the first to report it. It's not about, yes, it is about the quality of the content, but it's about the speed as well. The speed will always be a priority for newsmaking, for news journalism. There is no way around it. Because the people will go to those who report it first. On the other hand, that you have to be the first and you have to be correct. But we've had way before the fake news was a thing, way before it was such a advertised and popular thing. There was a situation. There was the string of terror attacks in France. It's called the Bataclan attacks. There was a night of consecutive terror attacks. And I was at that time working at I was not working with Sputnik. I was working with another website, but the concept was the same. It was an online news media, and I beg your pardon. We had people, obviously. But the reason why I said that the news, the social media have been a primary source of information for quite some time now, because back when Bataclan happened, it was 2016, I think. Yes, it was 2016. It was already a primary source of information. We would watch the Twitter and we would watch Facebook, and people were actually posting stuff about the attacks. That's how we stayed number one at that time on the French Google for 3 hours. But was there a real way to be completely sure that the people were saying the truth? No, because it was a sense of panic as well. All over the city, all across Paris, everybody was panicking. So every loud noise was actually perceived as shooting or as an explosion. It's, again, as a journalist, you need to stop thinking in categories, and you need to think. That's the most important part of the job. You need to turn on your head and think and be able to read those reports, to filter through them, to understand where, when five people in the same location have just tweeted within the past minute that they've heard shooting, then you can say that people at this location say they have heard shooting. Is that fake news? No, because you are actually reporting something that you have read about, that people are saying this. If it turns out to not have been shooting, you do the same responsible thing. You say that people said that they heard shooting, but it turned out to be non-true. It is about delivering information and not about politicizing what we do, which is the whole phenomenon of fake news. People make mistakes, and people are allowed to make mistakes. Yes, as journalists, we are less allowed to make mistakes than other people, but we are people. And as long as we are human beings, we do and we can make mistakes. It's about how you put things down. It's about how you phrase things. It's about being accurate, 100% accurate with your reporting. And 100% accurate means that if people are saying that they have heard shots fired, you don't say shots fired. You say people in Paris say they heard shots fired in, I don't know, across the way from Louvre. But whatever you do, you don't say shots fired near the Louvre. Or at least say shots reported near the Louvre. And then you are reporting information, you're reporting it fast, and then you will know whether it's true or not. But you can't afford to be the last, and you can't afford to make mistakes. It's not about doing fake news, it's about making mistakes, making stupid mistakes.
And as I always like to end, you guys, you've chosen to become journalists. That means that you will make mistakes and you will be blamed by everyone who read anything you wrote, and you will be turned into a scapegoat. There's that. No question about it. And more importantly, there will be always a group of people who will not agree with how you covered that story or the other, and they will blame you for being biased. Basically, you will be blamed for everything. Just get ready for this at this particular stage in your life. That will go much simpler later on. Okay, we are actually running out of time, so. One more comment. Given our lifestyle and imbalance of human needs and what the nature can offer, I think we can expect it's about another pandemic. Yeah, only the next time we will know how to deal with it better. Oh, sure, I guess. Let's hope so. Due to the pandemic, there has been a major shortfall in revenue from events like football, cricket, NBA. Will it tend to recover? Is it really a question for us? Right.
Probably not. Of course it will recover. Why not? The pandemic will end at one point. We just can't know when. Let's say that's down to censorship. I'm saying that, yeah, of course it will recover. I'm not quite sure that we're the people to talk about it, really. But it will recover, we just don't know when, because the pandemic will end at one point.
Yeah, sure. How do you think news should be presented? Is it a modern way or a formal way of presentation? Because people tend to infuse biased opinions many a times. Thanks. I'm not sure I get the question. You mean well, modern way, either modern way or formal way, they all can have biased opinions, but go on.
Every opinion is biased.
Every opinion is
opinion
biased,
is by definition biased because it's an opinion. So I'm not quite sure I understand the question either. Not really.
basically the bottom line of today's lecture is that everyone is biased. I am biased. Tatiana is biased. Like I always say, my 90-year-old grandmother is biased. She has an agenda. Like I always say, her agenda is to feed me as much food as possible, no matter what I say or what I want. She will lie. She will deceive. She will threaten me. She will make me feel sorry for her. But that's her agenda. And it flows through everything she does, and basically that's just how I learned that everyone has an agenda. Okay, so we have actually managed to answer in every question. So I'm guessing that you guys have to study, and Professor has to work, and Tatiana has to have her coffee because she's. You don't see it, but I can feel her dying a little bit slowly, but progressively here next to me. So, Professor, if you don't mind, I see that your mic is off again. А у директора замьютили?
Вася, они выключают.
Yep. Да, Ольга. Да.
Чтобы экономить, they're switching off because of internet. When internet problem, when they're switching off mics, they hear better. But let's ask, Professor Hart, switched on mic.
Can we hear Professor De Hart? Dr. De Hart, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can.
Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Now we can
perfectly.
Yeah. It was a fantastic interaction. The questions, with the exception of a few, which were a little inane, but most of the questions were quite engaging. I was really intrigued by the quality of questions. Some of the questions were very good, and particularly Tatiana's introduction to the subject and her interventions and replies, these were very relevant, and I enjoyed the way she presented it, and there was so much of personal touch about the answers, and a very matter-of-fact, personal, racy style. Fantastic. And I think our students must have enjoyed it very well. I did enjoy. Usually what happens is, in most of these webinars, I just begin and then I leave. But I continued throughout because I found it very engaging, and it was definitely interesting to hear about the experiences of journalists posted in the US, then experiences of the UK, France, in different locations. All these were very enriching, and I really enjoyed. And if I have enjoyed, I think our students also must have enjoyed, and that is also very apparent from the kind of questions the students raised, because the students were very attentive, and the questions, I was also surprised by the kind of questions. Usually, you see, as a teacher, you tend to underestimate your students. You think, you don't feel that they're capable of asking questions like that. They're undergrad students, whether they'll be able to ask such questions. But then they did surprise me with the quality of questions, of course, with the exception of just a few, slender few. And I really enjoyed it. And let's have more such interactions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you, thank you so much, Dr. Dhar. Yes, I enjoyed the questions
Very
very
interesting,
much.
yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. Actually, well, we do this thing for many countries, but like I said, usually the most provocative and interesting questions come from the Indian audience. That's why I
Yes.
enjoy this thing so much. And since your school is at the top in your country, it's only logical that we have so much fun here. So I would like to thank everyone, especially Professor Dhar, but also Olga Dycheva, who once again made it possible for us to have this conference through the magic of Zoom. I really hope that we can do this again sometime. And if you have any comments, just send everything to us. If you have any criticism of, well, not me, but of what Tatiana has said, also she's very open to criticism.
Yes.
Very open. So once again, thank you, and have a lovely day, everyone.
Yeah, you too.
But 1 minute.
Yes.
A word of gratitude of Professor Jory. Professor Jory, she asked me to give her mic. Sorry. But I will see you. I'm here in Delhi, my dear friends. So, Professor Jory, Rashpal. No? No, okay. Maybe next time. So thank you, Moscow. Thank you very
Sure.
much. I
Thank
think,
you very much. It was
yes,
really
this is the
interesting.
first time through Zoom, but not the last one. My dear friends, I'm here in Delhi with you.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
hope you're all fine. Yeah,
Yes, we'll be in contact. Thank you very much.
sure. So nice. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Moscow.
Bye.
Thank you.
God bless everyone.
Все, можно накрываться.